Hi everybody, so today we're talking presets. This is my series where we talk about presets that I think are actually worth the money. Presets should make our lives easier as photographers. They do a couple of things for us. They improve our workflow and they help build consistency into our work. Presets are basically tools we can use to be more efficient in the post processing side of our craft. I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there about presets. Some people feel that presets are bad. I think it's easy to fall into the trap of believing that if you buy a certain photographer's presets, that you'll end up with work that looks like theirs. That doesn't happen. You can't buy experience. You can't buy that artistic intelligence of that photographer, right? You're not going to get that for the money that you're putting in, but hopefully you get something that's worth the money that you pay. With digital assets, it's really hard, and I've certainly spent a lot of money on presets that I literally never use, so that's why I was inspired to create this series. Today we're talking about presets by a portrait and wedding photographer in San Francisco who you've probably heard of. His name is Nirav Patel. His work is absolutely out of this world incredible, and I have been so inspired by his portfolio of work. Just amazing stuff. So I was really excited when he put out the preset pack a while back. So the presets are called Lotus. They're called dual illuminant ISO adaptive presets. And if you go on the website, you can read about all that stuff. It's very technical. Basically, what it translates to is that these are presets like no presets I've ever seen, just in the way that they work. They use a profile that was created by Develop that is basically selected based on the camera that you're using. So the software knows what profile to apply intelligently to get you the best results, basically. We'll dive in and take a look at that in just a minute and show you the specifics of using them. But let's talk about the preset pack and what you get for the money. These presets cost $125 US, which is quite a lot for presets, I think. I do think that these in particular are worth it. What you get for that money is 4 different looks plus a set of tools. What you also get, and this is in my opinion what makes it really worth it, you get over an hour and a half of video tutorials with Nirav Patel. This is so valuable in and of itself, just listening to him talk about how he edits, how he uses these presets. That is invaluable. It's very rare that you actually get that when you buy presets. Sometimes you get presets and you apply them to your images and they look like total trash and you have no idea why. At least in this case, Nirav does his best to explain how to use these in a way that will really enhance your work. So the presets are called Lotus. You should go check them out on the Develop website. Like I said, we're going to dive in just a second. The other thing about this that I just want to put out there is, in my opinion, these presets are for a more advanced Lightroom user. They're not really user-friendly. They're not really easy to use. I think that they take a little bit of work to make them look good. They're marketed as, creating beautiful skin tones and artistic feel and all that, but sometimes I find that they just don't work for certain images. They just look too edited or too fake. And I think the way to avoid that is to just spend more time in Lightroom after applying the presets and working with the images. If you're willing to put in that time, you can really get a look that is unlike anything else you could get with any other preset, which is another reason that makes these really valuable. But one of my thoughts about presets, like a sort of foundational rule for me about presets, is that they should enhance our workflow. And if I have to go through and edit so much to get a look that I'm happy with, I don't know, I struggle to really buy into the idea that I'll actually use them on a regular basis. And then it's like, was it worth it to actually spend the money on them if I'm not going to use them very often? But in the case of these, I think that they do have the potential to create such an interesting look, and you do get that video tutorial with Nirav, and they might become a preset for you that you use all the time. I don't know. Let's dive in and take a look, and we can sort of get a better feeling for the process of using these. All right, so here we are in Lightroom. This is a shoot with a model I was working with. Her name is Ali. So this is one of the final edited images. And as you can see, I think that it's a really beautiful look. It's quite stylized. It almost looks like a painting. I've added quite a bit of grain here, but this is something that you can get with these presets. Let's take a look at another one here. Here's another final image, really beautiful. Another one here. So I'm pretty happy with where these ended up. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to go through and edit a couple more of these portraits using the presets, and we'll just edit them together. So I've already culled through all of these images. I've made my selects. I've brought them into Lightroom, and once they're in Lightroom, I've further made selects of the images that I want to edit and deliver. If you want to see my process on workflow, I do have a video of that, and I will link it here. Now let's just find an image to work with. Let's go with this one. So I've reset this image. This is how it was shot. This is what it looks like straight out of camera. It looks pretty bad, honestly, kind of orange, not great. But let's look at these presets over on the left. So the pack comes with 4 looks, as I mentioned. The first is Lotus, which is the pack's namesake. The way that these work is they're all in different groups. You have to choose the top option with the preset name, apply that, and then after you've applied that, you can select a modification. So each of them come with these modifications like contrast, dynamic range, some have a different tone option. So this is what Lotus looks like right out of the gate. This is chroma, this is gamma, and this is luma. So you can see they're quite stylized and might not work in every application, or they might just take some tweaking. For this one, let's apply gamma and see where we get with this. So here are some of the variation options you can add or decrease the contrast, lift the black point, or mute the photo. I think for this one, we'll just decrease the contrast slightly. I'm gonna adjust the white balance. So we're gonna cool this off. I'm gonna compensate here with a little bit of green. It's a before, it's an after. So I feel like there's a lot of blue coming in here from the tone curve. So I'm just gonna even this out a little bit. Maybe some greens coming in here. You can already see that it's starting to look quite a bit better. I might add a little bit of yellow. It's a before, that's an after, before, after. So you can see it already looks quite good. I might increase the contrast just a little bit, bring down the blacks. I'm gonna adjust my crop here so we can see what's happening a little bit better. Yeah, and if we zoom in, see, it's a before, that's an after. So you can see this actually is looking pretty nice. Let's see if there's anything we can do with the color grading. Not much here. Honestly, happy with this for now. I would probably start working on some other photos, come back to this, take another look at it, make sure that it's looking okay. It's hard to know sometimes after you've been staring at an image for a while if the color actually looks fine. And usually if you leave it and come back to it, it'll either be like, oh my God, this looks terrible, I need to restart, or to be like, oh yeah, that still looks good, and then you know that it's okay. Before we leave this image though, let's take a look at the tools that come with this preset pack. So we have a variety of grain options, lens corrections, and level and defringe. So for this, I'll add high grain. I've been really enjoying lots of grain on my images recently, and so we're gonna add that to this one here. All right, so that is looking pretty nice. Let's find another image to edit. We'll go with this one. This is straight out of camera. It looks pretty nice, actually, really beautiful. This was shot with a pretty large deep umbrella with diffusion and my Profoto B10, and this was shot with the R6 and my 70-200 f2.8. So here are the settings up here if you're curious about that. So let's go through these preset options and try to select the one that will work the best for this image. I'm thinking maybe Luma for this one. So I've applied Luma here, same kind of process. So we can go through and select any modifications to the preset if we want. I think for this one, I will increase the contrast. I'm gonna also increase the exposure, brighten it up a little bit, bring down the highlights. She's looking a little bit warm to me, so I'm gonna adjust the white balance a touch, bring in a little bit more green. Let's see, here's a before and here's an after. Let's see what the tone curve is doing. So the tone curve is doing a lot here. Let's see what color grading is doing. Yeah, so let's go into color grading. So I'm just introducing a little bit more yellow rather than green in this, in the grading, and I think that's helping just a little bit. Let's bring down the blacks a little bit more. It still somehow feels a little bit too red to me, so I'm gonna go into the tone curve and see if we can correct that at all. Let's see if we can bring down this tone curve, bring in some cyan, adjusting the blue and yellow. I think that's looking pretty good. Again, a little bit stylized. Let's look at the tools. Again, I applied the high grain here. That's a before, that's an after. So you can see that looks pretty nice. There it is, yeah, pretty nice. I'm gonna go ahead and copy these settings and then I'm gonna paste them onto the next photo. Sometimes this is also helpful just to copy the settings and paste them and see what they look like on a new photo. And often if the settings that you have are way off and you paste them on a photo that's similar, they'll look like they're way off and then you can sort of adjust. Sort of similar to going away, taking a break from an image and then coming back. This sort of fulfills that same kind of function. But in this case, I think that this looks really good. So we're gonna keep it. Let's apply it to this one. Again, looks pretty nice. Okay, so we've edited a few of these images, and now at this point, after I finish the color, I will take them into Photoshop and do any necessary retouching. I'm gonna open another gallery here just to show you how these presets will look when applied to images shot in another setting, just because I know that studio photography is not what everybody is doing. Like, you might wanna see what these look like on other photos. So let's just take a look. So here's an image of my friend Taja, which was shot in a studio, but with natural light. This is just window lighting. So if we go through the presets, we can see what these are looking like. I think for this, we'll go with Lotus, just the base Lotus. Let's crop this in here, just so we have something a little bit more reasonable to work with. Fantastic. Okay, we can look at our modifications here. I think for this, I'll add slight contrast. And I think that's all I want to do here. This is a before, this is an after. This actually looks pretty good. I might just bring up the exposure a touch and bring down the highlights, the whites. I'm going to add some grain. I think that's looking pretty cool. And I think I'm going to decrease the saturation here. Have an almost desaturated kind of look. Okay, and I think for the purposes of this video, we'll call this good. Let's move on to this next photo. This was shot at my friend's wedding with my 45mm tilt shift lens. So let's apply some of the Lotus presets and see what looks good here. I think we're gonna go with the Lotus again. I'm gonna increase the contrast by 2. This photo is a little bit overexposed, so I'm just gonna bring down the exposure. Let's see, bring up the shadows, bring down the blacks. I'm gonna increase the saturation a little bit. That's a before, that's an after. I'm gonna apply some grain here, high grain. I think that looks fantastic. Of course, I would need to bring it into Photoshop and take out some of these awkward objects and people and things, but I think as far as color goes, this looks pretty good, so we'll move on. So here's a photo from a wedding. This is one that I may have made black and white, but there isn't a black and white preset in this pack, unfortunately. But let's go through and see what might work here. I think for this one, we'll also go with Lotus. I'm gonna bring up the exposure, bring down the highlights, cool it off just a little bit. It's a little bit warm. Yeah, let's increase the contrast by 1. And I'm gonna lift the black point also. So that's a before, that's an after. You can see this looks pretty nice. Here's another one. Let's just copy the settings from previous and see what this does. That actually looks pretty nice. I'm gonna bring down the exposure. I'm gonna add some grain. Let's add some contrast here. We'll add some dynamic range as well. Yeah, and I think that that looks pretty lovely. Here's a before, and here's an after. This is a sort of like skyscape image, so let's go through and look at these. I think for this, I'm gonna apply gamma. I'm gonna increase the contrast, lift the black point. Might actually mute this as well. I'm gonna bring up the overall exposure, and I'm gonna add high grain. That looks pretty cool. Here's a before. There's an after. And then just one more here. This is from a couple session on the beach a few weeks ago. So same thing. Let's see what these look like here. I think I'm going to apply Luma for this. I'm going to decrease the contrast just by 1. Going to bring up the overall exposure, bring down the highlights before, after. I'm going to add some grain here. And it looks a little bit pink. Let's see if we can adjust that in the tone curve. Yeah, that's a little bit better. And we'll call that good for the purposes of this video. All right, so there you have it. Editing images with Nirav Patel's Lotus preset pack. So again, like I said, this preset pack is a little bit more involved than others, but I think it makes up for it based on the fact that it's really unique and you do get really interesting color in the images. They really are unlike any other presets that I've ever used. I don't use them all the time just because I do think that there is a little bit more required in the post-processing side of things. But if you like the look, chances are it will be worth it for you. So that's just something to know. Remember, you're not going to be Nirav Patel because you bought his preset pack. You're not going to make the images that he makes or that he has on his website because you're not him. And that's totally great and fine and okay. So just know that going in and don't be disappointed if the results are not instantaneous. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I hope it was helpful. If you have questions, please leave them down below. I do respond to all the comments here. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. I'd love to see you at the next video. Thank you as always for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye. Love is free.